Go ahead.
Okay. By that time, I wasn't working anymore. It was January of 1945 when we were liberated. I still was living with my uncle and my two cousins. And during the war, the fighting was going on. I was pretty much in the middle of fighting because we had fled our homes. There was a kind of depression between the American side and the Japanese side. Actually, it was the other way around. And they were shooting at each other, and the part of the civilian population was in the middle. So
was this in Manila proper?
This was in Manila proper. And the artillery was going overhead, the machine gun fire was going overhead. I don't remember a lot of people getting killed. There were some casualties among the civilians. We weren't hurt. About a day after that, remember, food was very scarce. I went to a stadium where the Japanese army had stored rice, which was the staple. And maybe hundreds of Filipinos each grabbed a sack of rice and brought it home. And I remember walking through the streets with literally hundreds of dead Japanese soldiers.
There was no one guarding the rice? You could just come and take it?
They were gone. I mean, the Japanese were dead or gone. People just helped themselves. About 2 weeks later, my brother came to visit because he was in the American Army by that time and was in Leyte, was stationed in Leyte, and had caught a plane, come up and visit. We saw each other for the first time in 7 years.
What was that like?
Very emotional. He was surprised how badly I looked. I had lost a lot of teeth because his Japanese dentist had pulled them all out. They were rotten anyway. And he had lost a lot of weight. I remember him being kind of heavy, and he wasn't that heavy anymore. He could only stay a day, but at least there was contact between family. So he went back to Leyte.
Wasn't the liberation of Manila a tedious process? I mean, the Japanese fought hard there, didn't they?
I'm going to tell you that.
Okay.
They destroyed the city. They put it to the torch. They dynamited downtown. The house that my relatives and I lived in was torched. We lived pretty well out in the open. I remember the Japanese soldiers going around with torches in their hand, throwing from one house to another, throwing torches into each house, and it just went up. Of course, they were made out of nothing but straw. These houses, not even wood. This was January. In March of 1945, the war was not over by any means. I couldn't stay there anymore. I just didn't want to stay. I knew the war wasn't over.
Were you working?
No.
No.
There was no way to work. There was no place to work. I went to the harbor. I had heard that there was a Hungarian Jew in Manila who was able to get a job on an American ship. So I said to myself, why can't I try? And I went down to the harbor, and at that time I got into the office of a nice Jewish, see, it's always the Jewish connection, man who worked for, at that time, the War Shipping Administration. And I said to him, my parents are in San Francisco. I'm stuck here. Haven't you got a job for me? And he said, what do you know how to do? And I said, I'm a cook. He said, I need a night cook and baker on a Liberty ship. This was 11 o'clock in the morning. He said, can you be here at 2 o'clock this afternoon? This ship goes to San Francisco. Sure, I can be here at 2 o'clock. Went home, packed a few things, grabbed my German passport without any visas or anything. They didn't care. They needed a night cook and baker. And at 2 o'clock, I was on my way to San Francisco. We made a few stops. We stopped first in New Guinea, in Australia. I remember that's why I sent my first telegram home from Sydney. I said, coming soon, may take some time. My parents always remembered that. Saved it, as a matter of fact. New Caledonia, and about 50 miles out of San Francisco, there was an announcement on the public address system. We're not going to San Francisco. We've just gotten orders to go to New York. 50 miles out of San Francisco. And went down to the Panama Canal. I wanted to get off the ship, and that's where I ran into problems for the first time.
That's what?
I ran into trouble.
Okay.
Because there was, the FBI came on board, looked at my passport and said, you have no visa. You can't get off the ship. And I couldn't. I was stuck on the ship. The first inkling. Then we landed in New Jersey, in New York Harbor, and we were lying at anchor in New York Harbor on August the 9th, I think it was. And I was in the wardrobe room, putting on some cold cuts, and the radio announced that an atomic bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima. And then came, the war was over, and then the FBI, then I heard that the ship was going to go to Germany. The ship I was on, the Liberty ship, and that I was going to be on it because the FBI would not let me go on board.
But the war
get off board.
The war with Germany was over, so at least you wouldn't...
The German war was over. I would have ended up in a DP camp.
Right.
And who wants to go to a DP camp?
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to go to Germany? I mean, my parents are in San Francisco. I had enough of DPs and Philippines and
Right.
and whatever. So this is when I did what I did. Took the aspirins. The ambulance came, took me to a hospital in Staten Island called Marine Hospital. And again, there was a nice Jewish doctor who said, you have a high white blood count, and I can keep you here. And the white blood count got lower and lower and lower. He said, John, I can't keep you any longer. I have to do something. Oh, by the way, while I was in the hospital, I remember St. Louis was playing Detroit for the World Series in 1945. And there were two men sitting next to my bed, private detectives hired by the shipping company to guard me so I wouldn't run away.
Mm-hmm.
And finally the FBI came around and said, sorry, you can't stay here. You're going to be deported. But before you're deported, we're going to take you to Ellis Island. Off I went. I wasn't handcuffed, but I went to Ellis Island. And got stuck in a huge room with a lot of people, sailors and criminals, you know, you name one. And again, I started to play poker, the gambler again. And I had made quite a bit of money on that ship because they paid me. I made about $1,200. I lost about $400 playing poker in Ellis Island. And the time went on and on and on, and nothing was happening. How am I going to get out of here? Again, the thing was not to get stuck. Remember, John Odenheimer makes things happen. And he did again. I said, who would be the person to get me out? Who's inventive? I talked to tons of Jewish organizations in New York that came around. HIAS, Jewish Family Service, you name it, everybody. They didn't do a thing for me, nothing. They said, yeah, you got to go to DP camp in Germany. I didn't want to go. I went on telephone and called my mother in San Francisco. I said, Mother, you come here and get me out of here.
So you turned to the real activist. Huh?
I turned to the activist, who I thought was the activist, who had this, this aura, the ambiance of being an activist, whatever. But she came. She took the train. She didn't like it. I know she didn't like it. She took the train and came to New York and saw me, and I remember jumping across. There was a barrier so that the visitors and the inmates could meet. And there was a barrier in between. I jumped across the barrier and hugged her. And the first thing she said was, John, you lost a lot of teeth.
And what happened to the white tuxedo?
She didn't say that. But later on she said, what did you do with all the money that you got for the white tuxedo? It cost me a lot of money, by the way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Live, okay. But she came, and somehow through the grapevine I heard that there was a lawyer, a Jewish lawyer, who knew how to get people out. And she found him, so she was being inventive there. And she brought him to see me, and he said to me, John, how much money do you have? I said, I have about $800 left after I lost. He said, well, why don't you give me the $800? And I said, sure, why not? If you can get me out, I'll give you $800, I'll give you more, if I had it. Well, I gave him the $800, and the next day I was out. And...
Do you know what he did?
Beg your pardon?
Do you know what he
Smear
did?
somebody, and wherever he had to smear somebody. And the rest is history.
You went back to San Francisco with your mother?
I went back to San Francisco with my mother. I had to go to Vancouver, British Columbia, to immigrate legally, because by that time I had received a visa. And
The rules were you had to go out of the country and then come back.
correct.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
You worked as a cook for how long?
I worked as a cook until 1953. And then I worked for the Palace Hotel for about 2 years. I went to Aspen, Colorado for about 6 months. And I was in Aspen in 1947, which was really the ground floor. And worked in some of the other hotels, but then I started to work for Bardelli. I don't know whether you know Bardelli. It's a big, a famous restaurant in San Francisco. And we were very busy. This was 1953, and my father was dying of cancer. And I said to Charlie Bardelli, I'd like to see my father before he dies. It's the evening. He said, you can't go. I need you here. Can't go. I said, that's enough. And I walked out. And that was the end of my cooking. I mean, then, with Charlie Bardelli, I quit right then and went to see my father. And decided right after that, that cooking was not for me.
Why?
Well, there were several reasons. One was the tremendous pressure. I was working in a restaurant that was right in the heart of the theater district. And people came in at 7 o'clock and wanted to be out at 8 for the first show, and everything was made to order, and that's just too much. And then this attitude on the part of and the level of intelligence it was just not the kind of life that I would want to lead. And at that time, Berkeley had, and I never graduated from high school, by the way. And in Berkeley at that time, the 50s, had something called, I don't know whether you know this, an admission program. This was for returning veterans. Came back from World War II, and you could take admission classes, and you were a special student, and you had to get A or better. A's are better, and I got straight A's in the admission classes. I was admitted as a special student till I was a junior, and got straight A's even then, and became a regular student in '55.
Did you know what you wanted to study?
No, I had no idea. I went to I don't know if you remember, there was in the old buildings, in the temporary buildings.
The T building.
The T buildings, yeah. Right. The School of Social Welfare was in T2. But there was another one a little further down, which was the vocational counseling building.
Vocational.
The vocational counseling.
Yeah.
And I wanted to become an anthropologist. And they said, you're very suited to become an anthropologist. But you have to have a PhD, and you have to do field work. And I had a family. I mean, I had 3 kids. I had 2 kids.
When did you get married, John?
I got married in '47.
Where did you meet your wife?
Here. So we've been married, we had our 50th this year. And by the way, I took my entire family to Italy, all children and grandchildren, 13 of us, rented a villa in Tuscany, and that's how we celebrated our golden wedding anniversary.
That sounds nice.
It was very nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I decided to go to school and finished school in 3 years. I was able, coming back to something, I got 16 units by examination, all in French.
Came in handy, huh?
Very handy.
Yeah.
Cut off a whole year. So that year in Paris came in very handy.
So how did you get into social work?
Well, again, at that vocational center, they gave me a series of tests. And since I couldn't become an anthropologist, and I needed to make money, I said, what else am I suited for? And she said, well, you can become a social worker. I said, fine, so I'll become a social worker. Had absolutely nothing to do with my liking people, like so many people say, because I wanted to find out about myself, or I wanted to like people. I liked people. That's all BS. I said because I need to make money and I became a social worker. And I said, huh?
You glad?
Yeah, very. I've been a successful social worker. I've had good jobs, led a happy life. It certainly was, I wouldn't be alive today if I had continued to cook. Again, I made this for myself. Because I know friends, I know people that worked for my parents. Jewish, we had it, after the Nazis were dismissed from the hotel, we hired an entire Jewish crew. And some of them are still alive, and they all into the catering and something related to that. And, you know, I have absolutely nothing in common with them. I changed my life.
Did you get the hotel back after the war?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Got the building back.
Uh-huh.
I'll show it to you. The hotel is still there. It became an old-aged home for the aged. The building, they reimbursed us. With the money, my parents bought a house in San Francisco.
They reimbursed you for the loss of the property?
The property, but not the loss of the business. It was really, really early. It was in the somewhere in the 50s already. And, you know, my brother and I sold that building in San Francisco too, the one my parents bought with that money. Today, we should have had it. We should have it today.
Mm-hmm.
So they reimbursed us, and I never got any money from Germany. I don't have any Social Security. And the reason is that I was an apprentice. And because I was an apprentice, no records were kept. So I have no papers that show that I was an employee. Otherwise, I would be getting Social Security.
From Germany?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The only thing we got from Germany was money on the loss of education, and that paid for 1 year of my graduate work in Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
We supported ourselves on that.
Mm-hmm. So what has all this done to you?
The experience?
Yeah.
I think it's confirmed my belief who I am and what my strengths are. And I think one of the biggest strengths is this ability to land on my feet if something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big help. This, at least the belief that I can. You know, I've had several surgeries. I have a history of heart disease. I've had a bypass. I've had angioplasties. But I'm always optimistic that I can beat these odds. And so far, knock on wood, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing it's done is I am today probably a better Jew too. It's confirmed there was never any doubt really about my Jewish identity. And I've always considered a traditionalist because that's what I learned from my parents. That it's a tradition that is worthwhile pursuing and also teaching to my children. All of my sons have married Jewish girls. 3 sons have married 3 Jewish girls. All my grandchildren are being brought up in that tradition,
Mm-hmm.
5 of them. And that makes me feel very proud and very pleased. The adventures I've had make me feel that, I have something to contribute to other people's, to the life of other people's, to be able to tell them that I didn't lead the last thing I want is lead a humdrum life.
Mm-hmm.
It's the last thing I want, and I don't have to say that I did, because I certainly did not.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I am.
Mm-hmm. How about your feeling about people? Did it hurt your perception of the world as a safe place and people as good?
I don't think I've ever had any illusions on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are good people and there are bad people, and I don't think I ever had any illusions. That there are, I knew evil, and I've known I've known generally kind people.
Mm-hmm. Could it happen here?
What's happened in Germany?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think it does. I don't think it could happen here because of the climate. The climates are so different. There's something about mostly about Europeans. The segment in America which is anti-Semitic today, is so much smaller and so much more insignificant than the segment in Europe. And I'm not talking about Germany only. I'm including all of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
They have a much longer affinity with Jews. We're a young country anyway. And something happened during this affinity that influenced their attitude toward Jews in a much more profound and a much deeper way than here.
Mm-hmm.
So this antipathy that developed over hundreds of years, whether it be of religious origin or whether it's just being different, that the xenophobia that people have, whether it's, I don't know, but I don't think it happens here.
Mm-hmm. John, I want to thank you so much for coming and being interviewed. It was a wonderful interview. It was a privilege to be able to interview you.
My pleasure.
And on behalf of the Holocaust Oral History Project, we want to thank you very much.
Okay.
Page with your picture on it. Go right ahead.
Oh, this is something that I don't think too many people have shown, which is what happened in the Philippines, in Manila to be specific, where the Japanese identified German Jews to differentiate them from the Nazis, the German Nazis, by writing in katakana, which is the phonetic language in Japanese, writing this into the German passport, and from then on you were known as a Jew. Japanese had still do, very little concept of what a Jew is.
Can you indicate with your finger where that is?
It's right here.
I see. To the right of
Right next to the right of my picture.
Got it.
Okay?
Right here we're looking at is?
That's the German passport.
Okay, go ahead and tell us.
In most German passports issued to Jews, they had the last name, the first name, the middle name, and and Israel for men and Sarah for women. But besides that, they had a red J stamped on them, which was apparently dictated by the Swiss authorities to not allow German Jews to immigrate into Switzerland. They wouldn't even let them in. I was able to go to Switzerland because I didn't have the J in there.
Let's jump
Okay.
what we're looking at.
This is a picture of the hotel right here. It became a Protestant home for the aged immediately after World War II. And it still is. We have been back there. I have been back there. My brother was there. And when he went in there, the people in the home told him this is where Jews lived at one time. So the stigma is still around, very much so.
So people said it with a negative
Yeah,
attitude?
that's right. This is it. These were the rooms where the guests used to live. Okay, this is a picture of the synagogue in Karlsruhe in its heyday, before it was completely burned and destroyed. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of, not handy, of the destruction.
Did you see it after it was destroyed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay?